Joining me today is a civil rights and constitutional lawyer with the Freedom from Religion Foundation and a man who, according to his Twitter bio, believes that life is too good to waste on bad ideas. Andrew Seidel, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. We've met once in real life, not on camera, as citizens out there in the world. We had a couple of drinks and
then we went to a Reason rally.
And then we went to the Reason rally, and I spoke at the Reason rally, and it was a weekend full of free thinking.
It was a lovely time. I really enjoyed it. In the nation's capital, no less, right in front of the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, it was hot as hell that weekend. I don't know how those people.
A bunch of atheists get together, you know.
And God was not kind when it came to the humidity. That line, though, I want to get it right, just right. Life is too good to waste on bad ideas. That is in your Twitter bio, and it's on your website. And I just love it. It's simple and pleasant, and it's right.
Thank you.
Why are we so bad at this, that we waste so much time on bad ideas?
Because we're irrational. We're emotional beings. We would love to be these fully rational creatures that weigh the evidence perfectly and don't have a problem making decisions on weighing that evidence, but we don't do that. We think we do it oftentimes, but we're actually really, really bad at it. And one of the things that I really try to do is to examine the ideas that I hold and the beliefs that I hold and make sure they're supported by evidence. It's one of the reasons I'm not religious. It's one of the reasons I help people who aren't religious. And it's one of the reasons that I chose that kind of as my personal motto.
Yeah. When did you kind of wake up to all of this stuff?
I mean, I was never really religious. I didn't start getting active in atheism and secularism until I started learning about the First Amendment, really in law school. I was reading The God Delusion in Iceland, traveling around Iceland after I had studied abroad in Amsterdam. I was doing international law in Amsterdam.
Studying in Amsterdam?
Studying international law in Amsterdam. Yeah, 6 weeks. We went to The Hague and everything. Yeah. I have decent grades to show for it.
Did you make it to the red light district? You can just nod accordingly.
I walked through it just about every day on the way to class.
All right.
And I was awakened to this kind of whole world of how religion is infusing itself in the law. And religion is so irrational and so non-evidence-based, and it was guiding so much of the decisions that were governing our everyday lives. And I was learning about this as I was learning about constitutional law and learning about the First Amendment, and just sort of the coincidence of those two things just kind of changed my career. I originally went to law school to be an environmental lawyer. I was going to save the world.
Yeah.
And now I am. I'm just doing it in a different way.
In a slightly different way, yeah. All right, so let's talk about the First Amendment, because everyone watching this knows I like to think of myself as some sort of free speech warrior. I'm a free speech absolutist, that you cannot call for direct violence. That would be a criminal offense, and I do believe in libel laws, and maybe we can get into that. I'm not sure what your stance is on that. But what do you make of the general, well, first off, what is the First Amendment? For people that don't, people get very confused about what the idea of free speech versus the First Amendment. So let's just do 101 first.
So, I mean, the First Amendment is the First Amendment to the Constitution that Congress passed. It was proposed in 1789, ratified in 1791. It says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition their government for a redress of grievances. So that's actually not just one right, that's 6 different rights. That's a secular government, the free exercise of religion, the freedom of speech, press, assembly, and petition.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? Like it's all in there.
It is. It's the gold standard of freedom. And it's amazingly condensed too. And if you had to sum it up, really what it does, what all those 6 rights do, is they protect the freedom of thought. That's what they're all meant to do. All the rights in there are all the rights we have actually are limited to a certain extent, with the exception of the freedom of thought. So you mentioned freedom of speech, you mentioned libel laws, and that you can't call for direct violence and incite violence. Yeah. Those are limits on your freedom of speech. There are limits on just about every other right you have except the freedom of thought, and that's really what we are seeking to protect. That's what the First Amendment protects. It is the one absolute right that we have, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is a beautiful thing. Do you think people get confused when they talk about free speech versus the First Amendment?
Yes.
Because all the time I see this, that somebody will say something, people will get outraged by it, or someone will lose their job at a private company. I'm not for people, generally speaking, I'm not for people being fired for sharing their thoughts, obviously, but I also believe in the right of a private company to do what they want to do. I don't want the government telling them what they want to do, et cetera, et cetera. So people get this all kind of crossed up. Right?
They absolutely do. I mean, the first word of the First Amendment is Congress.
Yeah.
And that's been interpreted to apply to the entire government, right?
Yeah.
So it means that the government can't infringe on your free speech. It means that the government can't tell you how to worship or endorse a particular religion or prohibit your ability to assemble. That's what the First Amendment does. Free speech is more general. It's the ethos that underlies it. A company shouldn't want to fire somebody just for speaking their mind. That's kind of the free speech. And people definitely get them conflated, and I've gotten into several exciting Twitter battles over this.
Yeah. I don't know fully what your political beliefs are, but are you with me on that general concept that although you wouldn't like it if a company fired someone over something maybe that a joke they tweeted or that kind of thing, but you would allow the company to make their decision?
Sure, I mean, and it's
right?
certainly not a constitutional right that the person has,
right,
unless they're working for the government.
Yeah.
And even then, in certain limited circumstances. So another place that this gets confused a lot is in my work. So we handle, at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, 5,000 state church complaints every year, and half of those are in public schools. And one of the things that we get all the time is teachers who are imposing their religion on their students. Mm-hmm. And we often hear, even from opposing counsel, well, the teachers have a free speech right and a right to their religious freedom, so they're allowed to impose their religion on students. And that's not true.
Yeah.
Right? They are, for all intents and purposes, the government. The teachers are employed by the government. They are the government. They don't get to exercise their free speech or freedom of religion in a way that imposes on other people's children.
Yeah. So to be clear, you're making an obvious distinction between a public school and a private school,
correct,
right? A
yes,
private school,
yes.
they can do what they want.
Sure.
What kind of case would that be where a teacher's imposing something? Like, are they, what generally, like, what is the teacher doing? Saying, well, you should be following the teachings of Jesus? Like,
yeah, so I mean, last week, I got a call from a mom down south, and this is fairly typical case that we get. Her third grade student, her son's third grade teacher, was having all the kids, before they went down to lunch for the day, line up to go sanitize their hands. And before they did that, they had to say the Lord's Prayer. And I mean,
that's completely bananas. This seems, I'm not a lawyer. This seems kind of cut and dry.
You would think so.
Yeah.
Except that we get 2,500 complaints in the public schools every single year.
Yeah.
And they're all relatively like this. A lot of times it's teaching creationism. It's teachers taking this public position that they have and using it to promote their personal religion. It's an abuse of power.
Yeah.
And you would think everybody would be against that, but we have a hard time correcting these sometimes.
So when you get a call like that, in something that seems like a very clear-cut case, I think probably, well, certainly for my audience, but I think 90% of, thinking people would realize that there's an issue with that. Having students that could be of any religion or not religious at all, or even if they're of the Catholic faith and they're Christian, you shouldn't have to do that, obviously. What is your action there? Do you guys first call the school and say, you shouldn't be doing this, and we're not trying to get into a legal battle here? Or do you immediately have to send something out and be like, you guys are in some legal trouble?
Well, we always want to work with a public school district rather than against them, especially public schools. I don't want to be suing a public school and taking money out of the public school and time out of the public school. They're already burdened enough. We want them to be focusing on educating students. So our first step is always to educate. And oftentimes, it's enough. So in this case, I wrote a letter, and that's usually the first step we do. We write a letter, we explain this is what the law says, this is why what the teacher's doing is wrong, and usually that's enough to make the change, but sometimes it's not. And in this case, actually, the mom had already went down to the principal's office and talked to the principal and said, what's going on? You can't be doing this. And the principal didn't do anything. So we went straight to the superintendent and pointed out the problems. It's a very frustrating situation when the law is so clear and the the opponents, the government, is so unwilling to uphold it. And it does happen. And that's when we start looking at, okay, now we're going to have to sue you. And we are certainly willing to do that, but again, our preference is to solve these things with education.
Yeah. How often do you find that people don't want to just speak up about this? So you're saying in this case, the mother went to the principal and it didn't get resolved, and then you guys had to take over. But I suspect that there are a lot of cases, not just when it comes to religion, but all kinds of things, that people's rights are being infringed on, and they don't even take the first step of trying to address it. They would then go the legal route. That may be ultimately okay for you guys, but that chill factor, that's what I talk a lot about here, that people are just afraid of speaking up for things even when it is their right to do so.
That's a huge issue in what I do. It happens in just about every case. Most of the people who contact us have never taken any steps on their own, and they are afraid to. And that's actually one of the functions that FFRF has, is to serve as a buffer between that person and their school. I mean, these people have to be in the school, that kid's got to be in the school for another 9 years, right? And he's going to have to live with having protested that, and it could be very difficult for him. So one of the things that we try to do is to protect the identity of these people. And historically, it's incredibly important, because if you speak out against religion in a small community, the backlash can be pretty severe.
Yeah.
There are cases where we've actually seen mothers of plaintiffs. So when you actually have taken this to court, where the mother was assaulted by a lunch lady after she was dropping her kid off at school, physically assaulted. Her house was firebombed later. Now that was in the 80s, and it was in Oklahoma. But a couple of years ago in Rhode Island, a young girl named Jessica Alquist challenged a prayer banner that was hanging in her public school. And she had to go to school with a police escort for a number of years. She was vilified on social media, hundreds of death threats. And her state representative got on the radio and called her an evil little thing, being manipulated by evil people. Just before the show, we were talking about when some public figures are very kind of proudly anti-gay LGBT rights, or maybe anti-atheist, that you can set your watch. A couple years later, just a couple months ago, he was found to have been embezzling from his campaigns. So,
of course,
yeah.
Of course. The chill factor when it comes to this stuff, I see that as a bigger threat to the idea of free speech than any threat that I see directly to the First Amendment. At the moment at least. Do you think that's fair to say? Like, I see us silencing ourselves now. I see that in just creeping into everything right now. The direct threat from the government, although there's obviously cases like this, individual schools and things of that nature, is a problem. I don't see that sort of systemically reaching out. Am I wrong on that?
Well, I think one of the things that people need to realize, and this is actually in a Supreme Court case, the court does a great job of explaining this, the case on fighting words. When does that free speech right kind of start to get curtailed? Are these actual fighting words, in which case you don't have a free speech right to say them? And what the court was talking about is they say that the whole point of free speech is to create friction. It's to invite dispute. It's to get people arguing and to make you uncomfortable. That is what it is designed to do, because we don't want complacency when complacency is wrong. So I think the chilling of speech is certainly a concern, and it's a concern that the courts have when they're analyzing this. I mean, it's one of the things they look at when does a law burden speech by chilling it, and by having people, and that's actually the language that the court uses, by having them not. Just having that law in place makes people less likely to speak up, for instance. So I think it's certainly a concern, and the self-censorship, which religion happens to be very good at, is definitely problematic.
Yeah, we're going to get to more religion stuff. I can see you're itching to get there.
I love it. It's so fun to talk about.
What are the other direct threats from the government that you see right now? Because I see a lot of people will say, well, Trump is a direct threat to the First Amendment. Now, I see he says things about reporters, which
sure.
I haven't seen him silence a reporter, but I do think that also is a chill effect, because if you're a reporter, you don't want then.
Absolutely.
It's not fun if you're a reporter and the President of the United States is saying mean things about you. Like that is the same chill effect. But is there something else maybe related directly to the First Amendment that's coming from the government right now that the average person isn't seeing, or maybe that's?
Well, I think there are actually some direct examples of what you're talking about already. I mean, Trump is calling on news organizations that are friendly to him and keeping out news organizations that are critical of him.
Yeah, but is that new? I mean, I think everybody's done that, right? I mean, Obama did that. Maybe it's a little more obvious.
I think it's a little more obvious, and I think it's a little more deliberate. And I think the bigger problem really for Trump, the bigger problem that I have with Trump is just his complete ignorance of the Constitution in general. I don't think we've ever had a president that has so little understanding or respect for the way government works. I don't think he knows that there is a separation of powers in the government.
I kept saying during the election that if you want to stop this guy, somebody just has to ask him flat out, what are the three branches of government and what are they supposed to do? Like if you want to just really get him in just a ninth grade social studies class, what you should know kind of moment, that would have done some damage.
I mean, I cataloged this a while ago before the election also, and there were a number of things he said. Talked about he was going to protect all 27 articles of the Constitution. There aren't quite that many. I mean, he just is genuinely ignorant, and that's scary in a personality like his, that is at heart a bully and that sees any type of compromise or forgiveness as weakness or apology as weakness. That is a scary combination.
So is there a piece of that, though, that if we are governed the way we're supposed to be, with the proper checks and balances and separation of powers, that no matter how crazy he went, it wouldn't matter? If we were really governed the way we were supposed to be, in that beautiful way that the founders set up, that if he went completely bananas and did a lot of stuff that was illegal and all that, well, actually, there are many processes in place to stop that. And I don't know that we're governed that way anymore, which is a problem. But
well, I mean, I think that is the test that we are going to see is our Constitution and is this form of government strong enough to withstand a totalitarian, at least a totalitarian mindset. And so far it looks like it is. The Muslim travel ban 2.0, it looks like things are functioning as they are supposed to. George Orwell wrote this great letter before he had actually written 1984. And in it, he was talking about how the UK, how England and how America had never been tested the way a lot of these other countries had been tested with totalitarian regimes. And I think we are coming up to that point here. I think it's hard to say that he is, but I think he's definitely got that mindset for sure.